In January 2019, Irving Finkel, curator of the Assyrian collection at the British Museum, received an access request from Serena Maria Ceccarelli, a specialist in Akkadian medical terminology at the University of Bologna. She was building a lexical concordance of anatomical and diagnostic terms across Old Babylonian texts, and something in BM 78943, the third major tablet of the Atrahasis epic, had caught her attention. Finkel had partially transliterated the tablet in the early 1990s. The passage Ceccarelli flagged had been read before, dozens of times. But it had never been read by someone fluent in Babylonian diagnostic vocabulary. It occupies 22 lines on the fourth column of the reverse, a section standard translations compress into a single paragraph, footnoted as mythological passage, ritual context not established. When Ceccarelli mapped clinical terminology onto those 22 lines, the classification collapsed. The vocabulary wasn't literary, it was medical. The text describes 6 bodies created before the human body. Each is evaluated. Each fails, and each failure is named using the same diagnostic lexicon Babylonian physicians used to identify pathology in living patients. The first body couldn't retain food. The second couldn't control its limbs. The third couldn't regulate excretory function. The fourth couldn't reproduce. The fifth deteriorated far faster than intended. The sixth was physically functional but couldn't follow the instructions of its creator. Only the seventh, our body, passed every check. The Atrahasis is not a myth in the way modern readers mean the word. Composed in Akkadian around 1700 BCE, it opens with the lesser gods, the Igigi, performing the physical labor of maintaining the world. After 40 days of unbroken work, they revolt, burning their tools and surrounding the compound of Enlil. The solution proposed by Enki, god of wisdom and biological design, is not to punish the workers but to replace them, to build a biological laborer that can carry the workload. The raw material is clay, mixed with the blood and flesh of a slaughtered god. The result is the Lulu, the prototype human. This is not metaphor. The text describes an engineering project with a stated objective, a material process, documented failures, and iterative correction. Each of the 6 failed bodies follows the same structure: creation, assessment, identification of defect, rejection. The first is described with la ikul, it cannot eat, compounded with terminology indicating food passes through without absorption. The phrase appears in medical tablets describing wasting conditions. The second suffers limpness of the forelimbs, using samatu, a clinical term for paralysis documented across the diagnostic series Asay.jig. The third cannot control its water, a phrase appearing verbatim in Old Babylonian urology texts. The fourth is la waldat, she cannot bear, the standard gynecological term for infertility. The fifth is described as aging before its days are counted. The sixth is la ishme awat belishu, it does not hear the word of its master, vocabulary drawn from texts describing animals that cannot be domesticated. 6 categories: metabolic, neuromotor, urological, reproductive, degenerative, cognitive. Each named with clinical precision by a scribe living 37 centuries before those disciplines existed. The transition to the 7th body occupies 3 lines. Enki dismisses the prototypes and instructs Ninmah, the birth goddess who shaped them, to step aside. What follows is a redesign from a different hand, and the vocabulary shifts. The terms for the first 6 are observational. The terms for the 7th are architectural. The scribe describes Enki working with the thread of binding and the measure of days. The 7th body has no defect listed. Instead, the text provides a specification checklist. It retains food. It moves with intention. It controls its water. It bears offspring. It ages within its counted days. It hears the word of its master. 6 criteria, each a direct inversion of the 6 failures, listed the way an inspector lists compliance items on a finished product. But the 5th criterion is not a description of natural lifespan. It is a constraint. It ages within its counted days, means the aging rate has been set, locked to a schedule. The accelerated decay of the 5th prototype wasn't eliminated. It was tuned, converted from a defect into a parameter. The seventh body was not designed to live as long as possible. It was designed to die on time. If the Atrahasis described a real engineering process, you would expect traces of the failed iterations in the final product. In 2012, the ENCODE Consortium published a 9-year map of the human genome. The headline was that roughly 80% of DNA, long dismissed as junk, showed biochemical activity. The quieter finding was more specific. The genome contains over 20,000 pseudogenes, intact gene structures that have been epigenetically silenced, not deleted, switched off. Many retain complete open reading frames, meaning they could theoretically produce functional proteins if reactivated. Consider the gulo pseudogene, which once produced the enzyme for synthesizing vitamin C. It is present, structurally intact, and deactivated, which is why humans, unlike most mammals, cannot make their own vitamin C, a metabolic deficiency that echoes the first body's failure. Other pseudogenes correspond to olfactory receptors, immune cascades, and reproductive signaling, entire subsystems that once functioned and then shut down. Beyond them, atavistic sequences occasionally reactivate. Embryonic tails, extra nipples, vestigial structures the genome still remembers. What resists dismissal isn't the vocabulary, it's the structure. The 6 failures follow a dependency chain. Metabolism must work before motor control becomes the visible problem. Movement before waste regulation, regulation before reproduction, reproduction before structural longevity, integrity before cognitive interface. Each stage must function before the next failure appears. This is not how myths are written, it is how engineering projects fail. When the J. Craig Venter Institute built the first synthetic cell in 2010, successive versions resolved failures in sequence, each fix revealing the next layer. They called it debugging. The Atrahasis calls it creation. Ceccarelli completed her analysis in summer 2020 and submitted it to the Journal of Near Eastern Studies as a narrow contribution to Akkadian lexicography. Careful, technical, drawing no provocative conclusions. It was returned without review in February 2021, citing a backlog. She resubmitted to the Journal of Cuneiform Studies. Returned again in June, this time for lacking supporting archaeological context. Finkel confirmed in writing that her terminology and transliteration were accurate. He declined to co-author and did not explain why. In August 2021, the British Museum updated the catalogue entry for BM 78943, changing Atrahasis 3, Creation and Flood Narrative, to Atrahasis 3, Mythological, Literary. The word creation was removed from the description of a tablet whose central subject is a creation sequence. None of this proves the Atrahasis records a literal engineering project conducted by non-human intelligence before recorded history. But the text is structured like one, the genome is structured like one, and the infrastructure that should examine the overlap is structured to ensure no one does. The tablet is in London. The photographs are online. 6 bodies were built and discarded. The 7th was approved with a timer built into its design, and the blueprints of the 6 that failed are still in your DNA, silenced but not erased. You are not the first attempt. You are the version that shipped.